Yeah, it looks like the markets are staying pretty flat. You know, silver's not doing a lot, but as long as it's down around 20 bucks, it's always a buy, you know, if you want to keep putting money into it, but you're not going to lose at this level. You know, something, you know, kind of came up a little bit about, I guess it was Iraq, and there was gold in supposedly around Baghdad that somebody pointed a link to. And I guess the talk was about the, you know, the Iraqi dinar. You know, I heard about this stuff from way back, and I think people during years ago made a lot of money on it. But if there's gold around Baghdad, you know, I just using my intuition about this more or less. If there's anybody going to get it, I'd invest in Halliburton, because I tell you the truth, I think they'd stick an oil well over that damn thing, and if it's close to the ground, they'd be like acting like they're pumping out oil, they'd be pumping out gold or something. Halliburton would get it before the you know, the Iraqi government would ever get it, or you know, so just got to figure who's around that area has got the most clout. Halliburton, right? I don't think, you know, I saw that, you know, somebody pointed to a link on that, and you know, actually there's a lot of gold in the United States that's not tapped. It's in California too, and Alaska. Alaska's got plenty of gold to actually pay off the whole U.S. debt, if you know, if it was extracted. You know, the other thing is, you know, how do you get to it and stuff? It doesn't just jump out of the ground. But you know, the reason gold is going to go up is because of a panic. It's not going to exactly be fundamentals. It's going to be a currency crisis. That's why your gold and silver is going to go up. It's not going to be because there isn't, you know, when people pull out all these statistics, there's so much silver left on the earth and all this kind of garbage. That's not really why it's going to go up so much, because what would happen is there's always this thing called demand destruction. I said this before, and I have specific videos on demand destruction, that if it goes up too fast, you know, it basically prices itself out of the market. They find substitutes, and they say there's no substitute for silver. There is substitutes. The engineers will find a way. Necessity is the mother of all invention. You know, that's just what the hell it is, and that's what happens. So it takes, you know, but the thing is, it could spike up that fast. It can go like that, and you know, you got to be lucky to catch the top, but that doesn't mean you're not going to make money somewhere from the level it is now, and sometime in the future. You will make some serious money on silver, and it's going to be financial panic. Now, yesterday I talked about a positive attitude on stuff. Now, I did specifically state that doesn't mean you stick your head in a hole and just say, you know, I'm going to have a positive attitude. But I'm just saying, what I'm saying is, there's people out there, I know they call it fear porn or whatever it is, but it's like they're glued to the media that's constantly putting out fear. And, you know, it's almost like, you know, when there's a war going on or something. You know, like how everybody, you know, CNN is reporting on a war. Everybody's glued to the TV sets, like, you know, what's going on next? What's going on next? You know, that's what these guys do. Now, maybe that's good for freaking business in the media world, but it's not really good overall. Actually, I don't even think it's good for business in the media world, because it detracts from other media that's legit. In other words, people get addicted to this kind of garbage. It's almost like a soap opera. You know, it's bullshit. So, I'm going to state something else, though, with some of this stuff with common sense, because, yeah, I'm talking about positive attitude, but that means you take action. But the thing is, you don't want to be like a doom and gloomer all the time. You know, if you think you're going to lose, if you think it's always going to be bad, you're going to create the situation that way. And your positive attitude means, yes, you got to take action. I've said this, you know, I did state this, but some people, I don't know, maybe they just kind of looked at it like, you know, I specifically said, you don't put your head in the hole, you know, but thing is, you got to have a positive attitude too. Now, I'm going to give you some examples, because I always like looking at ancient Roman history and Italian history, actually. And, you know, Rome conquered the world, the then known world, basically, that you could pretty much travel to by foot and horse, you know. You know, the characteristics, I want to get on with this, some of this shit, because it basically tells you the cycle of life of what the hell goes on with shit. The characteristics of the Romans was actually very austere. It wasn't like, you know, they showed in the movies as like pompous and, you know, corrupt. That might have been later on. But that's not what built Rome. It was actually very, very pragmatic to the max. No fluff, no muss. It's like if you got to build a road, it's going to go that way. And if there's a hill there, we're going to tunnel through it. And if there's a valley and over the river, we're going to put a bridge over it with arches. And, you know, we're going to run an aqueduct next to the road and stuff like that. No messing around. It was 100% like no nonsense, no discipline, all discipline all the way. No nonsense, no fluff, no bullshit. You know, Hollywood displays everything freaking all wacky. You know what I mean? That's Hollywood all the way. But, you know, they got corrupt after a while. So I want to even get into something else, something a little less known, because after the Rome basically fell, let's just say, you know, to give it a year like 465 AD in the Western Empire, and it lasted another 1,000 years in the Eastern Empire. But in Northeast Italy, they were getting invaded by, you know, Attila the Hun or whatever was one of them, right? This is where Venice started. And this is where, you know, you almost don't think of this kind of shit. You know, people, it was a swamp out in the middle. It was called the Venetian swamp, and there were some interconnected islands out there. And nobody could build out there. Nobody could grow any food out there. There was no fresh water. So, you know, nobody followed them out there. And eventually they start figuring out how to, you know, build out there. They put these wood piers down into the ground. You know, they're wood. Actually, they're still there today. The wood turned to stone. You know, it's like a specific type of tree. And they like had to put them real close together. Some of the buildings have like a million wood pilings all together before they put like the special marble foundation in. They put the brickwork above it. You know, it's basically sitting on, you know, they figured out how to build on a marsh. But nobody went there because it was too difficult to go to. But, you know, it's almost like this didn't just happen. It's almost like you go full circle. And they had a democracy. Well, I'd say it was a balanced form of government with limited checks and balances. You know, the Venetians, and actually the early Romans were like this. There was no empire. There was like no dictator. They were totally against dictators. The Romans were like that too. The Venetians for like 1,000 years. That was the big, you know, before like, you know, Portugal was #1 and Netherlands and UK was after that. The Venetians, you know, after the Roman Empire were a big economic power for hundreds of years. You know, they owned like the globe basically with their currency. You know, it was one of the most. It was about the most powerful nation going as far as money goes, and you know, it goes full circle. They got corrupt too. So, you know, 90% of the problem is corruption. And it's not just at the high levels, it's at all levels. It's at all stratas in society. That's why shit falls apart. And like I said, Venice came out of, you know, after Rome fell. And it's almost like, you know, you wouldn't, you know, right now it's like a tourist attraction. People aren't thinking too much of it. You know, it's like, you know, at the time, I guess from like a couple hundred years after Rome fell, for the next 1,000-something years, they were like, you know, #1 practically in the world as far as traders and wealth and all this kind of stuff and power. And they had a form of government that was checks and balances, and nobody can get on a top dog. They were totally against that kind of stuff, you know, totally. And they did this. And they built a city in a swamp, which for many years was considered the most beautiful city in all of Europe. I mean, even today, it's, you know, big thing. Everybody goes there. A lot of people go there. Maybe it's not, you know, I don't know. You know, I guess it's whose opinion it is. But even during its real heyday, it was considered the most beautiful city in Europe, for sure. Hands down. No problem. And that was built out of a swamp where nobody wanted to live. How did they do that? How did they do that? positive attitude too. It's almost like a can-do attitude. I mean, it's not like you just dream about it. They actually tried it. They tried so many different methods and failed before they figured out how to build. And you know, these structures are still there centuries later, and you know, maybe they're down about 2 or 3 feet from like 800 years ago, but you know, they're still there. They're still there. You know, it was all built on a marsh. So, you know, attitude has a lot to do with shit. So, I mean, this is probably what's going to come up eventually in one way or another, because it's almost like you got the bad guys after everybody, and there's going to be a way around the whole situation. Actually, I'm going to get into a separate video on this after about wood-burning stoves, and you wouldn't believe this shit what the EPA is proposing, but it tells you what's going on, and it gives you a good recognition of what the enemy is. So some of that stuff I talked about with, you know, this last video about solar power and going partial with it, with the direct 12-volt appliances and stuff like that, that, you know, they really can't argue that crap at all. They can't, because it's so clean. But, you know, it takes you off of their control through the grid piecemeal. So when I'm talking about, you know, silver people are actually into silver for what reason? They want to be independent. You know, I mean, that's really what happened after, you know, Rome fell and there's all these people coming in, invading and stuff. Rome fell because they got corrupt. You know, if they were the early Romans the way they used to be, it would have never fell. They got corrupt. And, you know, people want to be free. No matter what, they want to be free. So they established a city in a marsh. That was the Venetians. And it took a hell of a long time before they became corrupt. But eventually, when they became corrupt, they became right pickings too. So, you know, part of the deal here in USA with the problem is people got to go back to 101 austerity on a personal basis and starve the beast too. And that's one of the reasons you buy silver. You don't want to invest in the banking system at all. Screw them. Screw them. The hell with them all together. You buy physical silver. And that's really why you're doing it. You know, you don't need a bunch of people, you know, how much does it freaking cost in overhead to build this bank and all this SACE and all this bullshit that they got out there? For what? To exchange money? You know, for goods and services? What goods and services are they performing? And I'm going to remind you again, you know, when you look at not just the 1%, look at the 1 basis point and even beyond that, the 100th to 1%. Those people, they got way more skewed wealth than the 1% by far. And you know where they're all connected to? The banking system. Because it's a racket. It's designed to freaking extract wealth from people. So physical silver is a way to starve those bastards. And you know, it's starting to work. Because not just with the physical silver, but I mean, what's going on is they're basically created a situation where the wealthy are so wealthy, it's like they're creating an island with a bunch of massive poor people around them. They don't even have a market to sell to. You know, it's like they got a bunch of freaking numbers and shit that say they're wealthy. Which tells me that's not good. You know what I mean? I don't really know what their wealth really is. When you measure it in dollars, it may be nothing. It may be nothing at one point in time. That's what may come about, because the wealth, the disparity between rich and poor is getting so great. It's almost like, yeah, I got a whole pile of these, you know, widgets or some shit that are made, you know, that are like electronic money, and you don't have any of them. And supposedly that gives me the right to own everything. You know, that's basically what they're saying, right? In a nutshell, if you really want to put it really simply. But what does that happen? What happens after a while? They don't even have a market to sell to. Nothing. Nothing. It's like they're painting themselves in a corner. That's why I say stick with the physical silver. But, you know, on the other side of it is, you know, when people get down in the dumps too much, the situation is so bad, it's never going to change. You know, out of the worst situations in the world, some of the best things came about. You know, and I'm just pointing to the example of Venice. You know, Rome was attacked. You know, it finally became corrupt. Northeast Italy was getting overrun. and people were running to the marshes out in the Venetian swamp. And who would have figured, piece by piece by piece, by striving and figuring things out, a few hundred years from that time, it turned into one of the most powerful cities with a highly representative type of government that had checks and balances, no dictatorship, and it flourished for 1,000 years. It was the trading capital of the world for many, many years, for centuries. Who would have ever figured that? So that's what I'm talking about, positive attitude. It doesn't mean you stick your head in the hole. But sometimes out of the worst things that come about, it lays the seeds for something else to come out that's even better. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, I'm going to follow this video up with something about wood burning and the EPA, so you can recognize the other enemy out there besides the banking system and the banksters.